Where do you see opportunity then right now? Where is the opportunity with everything going on?
I think we hit one nail on the head. If you have cash right now and you can buy higher yields, and you have a longer term outlook, some people have 12, 24, 36-month outlooks, but if you have a 5 to 10 year outlook with cash and you can buy in core markets, and LA is a core market, San Diego is a core market, New York, there's core markets out there that don't have supply demand issues and other things, you're winning. And so cash is king right now, and a lot of those core funds meaning that they usually just do lower returns with a lot of cash, are having a field day. This is their moment to shine. I think you need to be particular. I do think you can take advantage of the market right now, and so there are distressed sellers. We've talked about that during our conversation today. So if you're able to have capital to take advantage of it, I think you are going to be in a good position as long as the dynamics behind the deal are actually accurate. You're not buying a fake cap rate. A lot of markets I feel like have fake cap rates. LA, I don't think is one of those markets. I think you have a lot of certainty behind revenue and expenses. And then you're also have the ability to just go into different asset classes and different value-add business plans that we're seeing. A lot of the things we see on the debt side right now are really interesting. There's a huge push to affordable right now. And that's a really interesting business plan. And a lot of the deals we see on the debt side have some affordable tint to it. And what's happened over the last couple of years is that a lot of the Section 8 rents in the market are actually above market rate rents, meaning that if I went to go lease a one-bedroom at a market rate tenant, I'd get $1,500. But if I used a Section 8 voucher, meaning that the Section 8 rent is done by the municipality, sets it, and the tenant brings the voucher, I could get $2,000. So all of a sudden, a lot of the business plans, I think you sell a lot of these plans as well, are all of a sudden being switched to affordable. That's really interesting. There's ADU laws that we know in California. A lot of the business plans that we see have a tremendous push of adding density, which is great because we need more housing, and is really interesting because you're actually adding true value to your building. So if you can buy real estate right now and either have that longer term view where you don't have to really be at the whims of this negative arb financing market, or if you have a real business plan that's adding tremendous value at a better basis, I think that's a really interesting opportunity. And we're seeing a lot of it right now. I think over the last 60 days, things have started to crack.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We're selling a portfolio primarily of a lot of Section 8 rents. And one of the main questions people ask us is there a vacancy? Are there vacancies? How many Section 8 rents are there? Because I don't know if who came up with this term, but they're calling it Section 8 Roulette. And Section 8 Roulette is basically where you have a vacancy and you renovate this unit. You take an existing tenant in one of the units who's maybe has lower Section 8 rent or lower rent. You have them move into this newer unit, because why wouldn't you? You're paying the same amount of Section 8. They are, at least, just the government's covering the difference. And then you have another vacant unit, and you just start moving tenants around. They get a better place to live, it's the same cost, and now you're increasing the NOI, where in properties where you can buy for 140, 130, 150, 160,000 per unit, you're getting these rents that are $2,000, $2,500, $3,000. And it's just wow, you're looking at these numbers and it actually pencils. The other thing you mentioned was the ADUs. When I talk to buyers, I'm like, hey, what's your buy box? What are you looking for? I'm looking for vacancies. I'm looking for Section 8, and I'm looking for places to be able to build ADUs, because you're not constrained by things that are outside of your control. You can control typically, given the timeline, but most cases, if you can build an ADU, you will be able to build an ADU within 12 months. And so you can actually force that appreciation, force that growth, do that value add per se. And that's where we're seeing people move to, because they actually have control of what they're doing.
I love that term, Section 8 Roulette.
Yeah, Section 8 Roulette.
Funny enough, we probably see 10 to 20 loans a month on Section 8 Roulette.
Really?
And we've done that before.
Yeah.
And it's a huge benefit, because at the end of the day, the tenants are getting nicer apartments.
Yeah.
And you're getting more Section 8 in the door, which is great for all parties. So it's a really interesting business plan. It helps all parties. I like that term. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah, you should. It's a good one. I'm going to say that I came up with that, but I think I stole that from someone. So let's talk about the expenses, because we were talking about how LA is typically, you can kind of understand that But I think a lot of people are feeling pain in certain expenses that they haven't felt previously. What has your experience been with that, and how are you approaching, because you guys are still buying, how are you approaching that?
Yeah, so this is of the utmost importance, and it drives how we make decisions on the debt side, and it needs to drive how everyone makes the decisions. And when I say fake cap rates, this goes into that conversation too. Expense ratios are really important. And what happens, and you probably know this better than I do, when someone's trying to sell you a building, they are not articulating all their expenses that actually exist to run a building. So if you're seeing a 20% expense ratio, that doesn't exist. Yeah. Now remember, in California, 20% of the expenses should just be in taxes because they reset upon purchase. And so we are very careful. We have enough data that we know what we run our buildings at. So our best buildings run in the low 30s. And that's because...
That's your best buildings.
Our best buildings.
Yeah.
And the reason and maybe we have some in the high 20s, but like, let's say low 30s. And some of the reasons is because of that revenue growth. My taxes become a significantly lower portion of my gross. They go from 20 to maybe
because they're capped at 2% a year because of Prop 13.
Exactly. But I still have all these other expenses. My worst buildings probably are in the high 30s to low 40s. And then really bad buildings run at 50%.
1920s brick buildings.
Yeah, there you go.
RIP.
Workforce housing communities, heavy Section 8 buildings actually do this. More just covenant restricted affordable buildings tend to run at that. And so what's also happened is, away from taxes and other things, there's been a big move in a lot of other sectors of our expense loads, insurance being the biggest. Unfortunately, I can say over the last 5 years, every year except for one, we've had a massive increase in our insurance. This year, I think the insurance came in at a 35% increase. That is not the first time I've had that type of increase over the last couple of years. We actually feel really fortunate. We have a great insurance partner.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a couple of years ago when this was happening, I was literally pulling out my hair. And I think I gave a high five this year. I said 35%. Boom. That's amazing. That's a win. Crazy as it sounds. And so one of the things we do when we look at markets like Texas and Florida specifically, and we look at those markets, is we look at the insurance expense. And one good rule of thumb is historically, and you probably know this too, like 500 to 1,000 a unit per year for insurance was a good rule of thumb. You were doing really well if you're doing sub 500.
Yeah.
In some markets now, multi-$1,000. Like in Florida, you could be like $25, $35, $4,000 a unit. Like we were looking at a building to potentially purchase in Florida, 26% expense ratio. So immediately we had to change it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons was that their insurance per unit was $650. The quotes we were receiving if we took over the property are like $3,000 a unit. That's just on insurance, that's a 8% move in your entire expense load on just one item. So if I had one thing to say, again, back to these fake cap rates, you really have to take a closer look at your expenses to make sure they're accurate, and that what the previous owner's expenses, and by the way, I'm not saying that they weren't their expenses, will likely be different for the new owner, and there needs to be a lot more due diligence done on that aspect.